Thank you.
Professor Kadri, it's a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us today. I need to briefly introduce Professor Kadri because to many of us, he is not as familiar as he may be to the rest of the world. Professor Kadri is an economist by training and a Marxist that is his passion, that is his ideology. And he's a prolific author, including his 2023 book, which caused quite a little sensation, which was The Accumulation of Waste, a Political Economy of Systemic Destruction. Professor Kadri, and I need to make this because I need to say this, Professor Kadri, because to a lot of the Indian audience, you are not as familiar as we would like you to be. So, Professor Kadri has theorized on genocide, which he says is neither an aberration nor unusual. He uses the expectancy of life in poorer economies, meaning that life is nasty, brutish, and short in the poorer world compared to what it is in the developed world, to talk about the structural genocide that he says is endemic to this world, to the world order as it is. And we will then move on to the fact that Professor Kadri is one of the most important things that Professor Kadri is talking about is that war is a form of production. And out of this production, what emerges is destruction. So, Professor Kadri, if we can sort of focus on what is currently happening in the world, which is our attention is focused on Israel and Israel's destruction of Gaza and its now current program to destroy as much of Iran as it can. It has already destroyed much of Lebanon and Syria. So what do you make of this war? What is it that is going to be achieved out of this war?
Yes. Well, in the book, I say systemic destruction. So destruction is systemic to capital, and it's systemic to the intense facet of capital, which is imperialism. Imperialism is just a concentrated dose of capital. That means it's expropriation of the proletariat, it's expropriation of the working classes, and expropriation cannot be done without violence. Violence is intrinsic to the system, and the system benefits twice from the result of winning in wars and the results of reconstruction, and from the destruction itself. The destruction itself is a product of war, and it's priced. The death of nature and the death of man in wars and imperialist wars and in structural genocides are themselves commodified, and everything that is commodified is priced, and either implicitly or explicitly, because the price system is interrelated and it's liquid and it's time incoherent, and it may not appear now, but it's factored into other prices. And what imperialist war does is it is sort of the first stage in any production process, because in any production process there are various stages to production which all end up in the final commodity. But to make the final commodity, we need various raw materials and so forth. And the first raw material to extract is not the oil or the copper, but the life of man, because there is no raw material or resources anywhere which are in areas which are uninhabitable by human beings and by populations of sorts. And so the extraction of these raw materials requires the extraction of life, the extraction of the life of man. And because war involves the deployment of machinery, the deployment of waged soldiery, which is waged workers for imperialism. It is a factory. It's a factory of death, and the death that it produces is an itemized item for sale. There are rents that accrue from the treasury bills that went into financing the wars, and so there are profits from the war on its own, and there are profits from the fact that the war may end up by changing the balance of power, changing the power of the subject in history, the power of labor against capital. Diminishing the power of labor against capital has a sort of relative surplus value implication for the rest of the world. It lowers the price of the commodities that imperialism draws from the third world, and therefore it reduces the social cost of the reproduction of labor. It reduces and it leaves more out of the social product for capital and so on. So war as well has the impact of shortening lives precipitously. Unlike structural genocides, unlike the world-imposed hunger and the austerity that and the lack of social funding to take care of society, to put back into societies what has been taken out of societies, wars have a ripple effect. They sort of cut life expectancies by a lot in a very short time. We see that in Yemen, we see that in Sudan, we see that everywhere in the Congo, and these. So war is in a sense, like I said before, it is the first stage, because if we need the raw material, we need to extract raw materials. We're going to extract lives before, and so war has this resonance and ramifications on all the production process. More importantly, war contributes to the power structure of imperialism and the world financial classes. It boosts the power structure of and not only the military power but also the ideological power, because masses might interject defeatism, might accept the word of capital as sacred, and they start to live by it in order to adapt to the conditions of defeat. And war contributes to that, to boosting the power fabric of imperialism. It's a class fabric, and it's not a national. Class is never nationalist. Class is cross-national. So the financial classes everywhere are integrated in the dollar domain, and the projection of war as it is a football game in which the better equipped team wins and so on. All of this feeds into the ideological apparatuses. It's produced by the ideological apparatuses of capital, and it feeds into the ideological aura of capital, the power, the essential component of the power fabric of imperialism, or the world financial class. And this is what we see everywhere. And the genocide is not, the genocide, Marx says that capital drips in blood from head to toe, something like this, so if I recall correctly. This is not a rhetorical statement, or a figurative one. This is a real statement, a statement that occurs every day. The other day from the Tricontinental Institute, there was an article saying there are several 100 million people who are basically hungry in the world, unnecessarily hungry, and so on. And so we see that the structural genocide is ongoing. And as we recall, when Friedrich Engels talked about the working class in England, he actually mentioned the structural genocide and the effect of austerity and pauperization and indigenacy on life expectancy and the living conditions. And Marx also says that capital economizes the life of the worker. if I paraphrase correctly. So basically, it cuts short the life of the worker. And one thinks, so genocide is not alien to capital, it's not alien to imperialism. Uh, the, uh, the German poet Bertolt Brecht says that the bitch that bore the fascism of Germany is still with us, and rightly so, because it's the same capitalist production relations that remain with us, and they remain with us, and the crisis of capital remain with us. And capital finds itself in its element, in its utmost relevant condition, when it has personified itself in sections of the working classes that embody the spirit of capital, that becomes form of capital, that have no potential for revolution, because they reproduce themselves out of the imperialist dividends. And imperialism divides the world into this global elite financial. I don't like the word elite. I just read it for some. Into the world international financial classes, and the South, and the masses of the South, and part of the masses of the North, the disenfranchised minorities, and so on, which are not the embodiment, which are not the personification of capital. And in this process of social reproduction on a global scale, we have the North decimating the South, the North exemplified, and its exemplification in working classes that have become thingified, that have become things, like capital thingifies its proponent classes, the capitalist classes. And the reproduction, the contradiction between capital and labor becomes a contradiction between the North and the South, in which the North, the northern classes, the ones that exemplify capital, that are the instantiations of capital, they reproduce themselves through continuous imperialist aggression and structural genocide. And imperialist aggression takes the form of structural genocides. I think it was James Buchanan once that said to the United States that we have to stop talking about the human rights thing, because one day we will have to intervene in violation of what we say is human right, and that will not be in our interest. It will. And we've come to that point. That was the spirit of capital that was brewing 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it has now culminated in the show that we see in the United States. It's not a mad show. That's a natural result, a natural progression to the crisis of capital, and also the crisis of socialist ideology globally that has set in since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so we have an unbalanced power structure in which imperialism finds itself cozy with things. Now, Israel, of course, is just, as Theodor Herzl says, if you make us into a state, we will be the vanguards of Western civilization and we will protect your interests. And Benjamin Netanyahu is like the Ukrainian Zelensky, is saying we're defending your democracy and we're defending the values of Western civilization. The other day he said that. So what we have indeed is a natural progression of events into genocide and more genocide. So what we see in Gaza is not necessarily going to stop in Gaza. And what we're seeing with the assault on Iran is not necessarily going to stop with the assault on Iran. It's for the rest of the world to see by the demonstration effect that if you don't submit to our diktat, to our fear, then we will do the same to you. We have no restraint, no brakes on what we will do, and so the conditions are such that the world and anyone could say at some bifurcation, at some fork in the road, but we are now. Every situation, it's a question of degree, and the degree to which the intensity of the situation, this historical moment, this conjuncture, how the balance of forces will play out in real events. We are at a very crucial point in historical developments. And many around the third world do not see it. They let the identity, either the national identity, the ethnic identity, and so forth, ride and have precedence over the class identity, over the ontological conditions of existence, because the class is just a social relations by which people live. If they're farmers, they are a farming class, and they have a relation to themselves and to other, and they are as a social relation or a class determined by these relations to themselves and to others. So it's an ontological condition. It's a condition of existence, and it's far more important to put the conditions of existence, because we are all now in an existentialist crisis, both socially and environmentally, and we need to basically put an end to the progression of capital. We need to rally all the forces against imperialism and the assault on Gaza and Iran and Iraq and Sudan. And I mean, the other day, Cypri or some other, I don't remember, says they've counted how many wars and disasters there are in the world, and they're saying that this is a time in which we see more war and disasters. So what I say in my book is just to pay, let's pay attention to the phenomenon, what we experience globally, which is a constant condition of war and genocide, either structural or direct genocide. And that's not really too, and the ideological apparatuses of capital, always make people pay attention to trivial things rather than pay attention to how their social being, how they will live, how they will reproduce in relation to their social consciousness. And they should have a confidence. Yes.
So Mr. Kadri, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because that's what journalists do. But Professor Kadri, I would like to sort of look at something else. While you were speaking, it occurred to me that what we are seeing now across the world is the pushback from masses of people who are out on the streets protesting. We've had on the 17th of June across India, we had marches in support of Gaza and then ending the genocide in Gaza. That has been the demand. Now, how do you see this as this is obviously not a powerful enough mass movement, but how do you see this working itself upon the so-called democracies and the systems of production of war that we are talking about?
Yes. I mean, if you want to talk about development and the all-round social development, it all depends on the power of labor against capital. How the South is, when the South is united, it drops its ethno-nationalist conflicts, it puts those aside, and unites to see the real balance of forces, which is the ideological and military power of the West in relation to us. And military and ideological power are self-reinforcing. You need military power to subdue people first before they buy the stupid ideas of capital. So, what is and it is never possible for capital to actually make people submissive to the point that they will basically auto-consume, self-consume in the process of their life. Instead of living longer and living better, they live shorter, and they're basically eating away at their own flesh instead of turning the gun against capital. And if we recall, if we go back to the history of the post-colonial and independence movement, and we recall the great days of Nasser and Nehru and Tito and Zhou Enlai and so forth, and we recall that movement and Sukarno, we recall a world in which the injury of one in the developing world was the injury of all. And we recall a movement of international solidarity that existed. There is no reason why this shouldn't exist again. In fact, all the conditions are ripe for such solidarity to emerge and for people to see beyond the veil and that is being imposed on their minds by the power, the institutions that produce knowledge. The capitalist institutions, the primary capitalist institutions that produce knowledge, the media and the universities and so on. These capitalist institutions do not produce knowledge or technology to serve the people. They produce guns against the people. They produce weapons against the people. And yet they're made into some, fascinating product that captures people's minds, that makes people go say, whenever they hear the word Harvard or something like that. But if we think about these institutions, they are principally responsible for the production of knowledge. And the production and knowledge is knowledge is practice. The knowledge that has been practiced so far since 1500, let's say, the rise of capitalism until now, has produced the disaster that we have. We have a planet that people say will be extinguished in 50 or 100 years. When we say that it will be extinguished in 50 or 100 years, that means we have so many dirty pollutants that exist, that we produce more dirty pollutants and more poison than any of the good things we produce. So that knowledge, which belongs to the ruling financial classes, has been practiced and has produced the death of the planet environmentally and the death of nearly 1 billion people in colonial and imperialist war and structural genocides and so on. So we have a situation, a mind of history, a geist of sorts that has been practiced, that is the mind of capital. That is not, there are two civilizations. Well, there isn't an Eastern and the Western civilization. There is a capital civilization and the labor civilization. And labor must rise, the civilization of capital. We've seen what the civilization of capital has done. It's, people who, financial persons that carry the financial capitals that carry the national passport do not belong to the country that they carry the national passport. Their money is deposited in treasury bills. They belong to this cosmopolitan international financial class, which is socialist for itself, within itself, because it shares the product according to the shares of capital that people hold in that class, and capitalist against the working classes everywhere. So we have to question the basis of the production of knowledge of capitalism. It is knowledge that is instrumentalized. The ideas of the time are the dominant ideas are the ideas of the dominant classes. And we see what the outcome has been. We are close to environmental destruction and we have huge social destruction. So people have to take this very simple and obvious point that the knowledge that we are producing is a weapon against us.
But they are saying this, Professor Kadri. The activists on the ground are saying this. There are more and more activists coming out on the streets to say this. So how do you look at that?
Well, that's very encouraging indeed. I think we are. I'm not pessimistic. at all. I am saying we are now at a moment in history when the balance of power globally is shifting. We have India and China rising,
India is not rising the way you think it is.
No, I know that. I just said that. I know
Sorry, I'm not going to let that pass. I'm not going to let that pass.
There is some sort of collaboration between the Russians and the Chinese. I know how India is doing. I mean, I've talked to Indian comrades, and I've explained we need more. We need a social plan of sorts. But I don't know enough about India. I know very little, but I know that what you exactly said. So we have powers that are rising that must join forces against the weight of history, the weight of capital civilization, which has something like a historical surplus value. Ideas that have become entrenched and habits in all the agencies of the world, all the social agencies of the world. The historical surplus value could be, it's an accumulation not only of wealth, it's accumulation of the ideas as well. And what we have is like a rail for a train, and that has been pre-laid. So the United States and the international financial institutions do not have to tell a developing country what policy to pursue. Because of the weight of history, because of that historical surplus value, a developing country simply chooses to be a path of self-destruction and self-harm. So the ideas have become habits that people must come away from. Everything must be questioned. And the rise of activists on the street now, the questioning of everything and the criticism of everything existing, will eventually develop into from criticism by word to criticism by weapon. Because in the end, without the weapon, without the real weapon, it is impossible to halt the advance of imperialism, and as long as it leads, it will destroy the planet. But so the working classes everywhere are moving in that direction, where they're going to, and the activists are moving in that direction, where things will take. Like you said, it is not enough, but there'll be more coming in the future. So I'm very optimistic. One should never lose faith in the masses and their ability to comprehend. The masses live the conditions of poverty and misery. They experience the wrath of capital firsthand, and they know it is happening. But the role of the vanguard is to basically set the pole ahead of the events and make the cost of the transition bearable for the working classes, because there is a heavy cost to pay. Capital is merciless. Yeah.
Very heavy cost. Professor Kadri, one question is, there has been a move, and I'm kind of puzzled by it. There have been Israel has now been described as a criminal state, a rogue state, as it were, in international law. Yes. The international court has sort of de-recognized Israel as a state and has condemned it on its human rights violation. But yes. How has this criminalization, legally criminalizing it, had any impact whatsoever on how the rest of the world, on how finance capital and the powers that are there in the United States, in France, in Germany, and elsewhere, who all talk about the rule of law, but ignore the fact that today Israel has been described as a criminal state?
Yes, I mean, if you take the German Chancellor's words just the other day, a couple of days ago, he says that Israel is doing our job for us. It's doing the dirty work for us. So it's not like Israel is criminal. I mean, the United States is a settler colonial state based on genocide. Much of the European continent is based on the genocide of the colonies and so on. So genocide is inbuilt into the system, as I said at the beginning. So to them, this idea of human rights and the Principal Declaration is just a sham. It's a charade that they use basically to buy people into submission, to give the weak a sort of something to talk about without resorting to the weapons that they have to resort to in the end to get rid of themselves, to get rid of capital. The Israeli state, however, we know that it has committed genocide. We know it's barbaric. We know it has been criminalized. But for the international working class, what we have, and a working class is not just the forms of organization, the institutions, and so on. It's also the memory of the working. We have a memory. Like I said, now when I talked about the possibility of betterment of things, I talked about the international solidarity that occurred after the independence of many countries in the third world. And now we have a memory, and a class is also, it's the store of memory of the international working class. So we have now a new memory to add against capital, which is going to be our fuel and the driving force that will galvanize the conditions for the struggle to come. People around the world are moving and resisting and displaying forms of social disobedience and so on, not because only because of this humanitarian support for the conditions in Gaza, but also because they know themselves that they are suffering from the wrath of capital. And if they do not fight capital, they might sooner or later experience the same conditions of genocide that Gaza has experienced. So the fight for Gaza, the fight to liberate Gaza, and the fight to liberate Palestine is a fight for all the international working class. And that's an ontological condition. That's a condition of existence, because a class is a condition of existence. And so now we have reprogrammed in the memory of the international working class a televised genocide, something that the new generation sees and the old generation sees. And this will be the stepping stone for the future to struggle. And every time there's a struggle somewhere, it's going to pinpoint to the barbarity of the Israeli state, but to more so to the barbarity of Western capital, the Western financial classes, and the colluding comprador classes around the third world, which are more poisonous than the international financial classes, because they betray their own. They betray. They are like us, people of color, but they support the racism that denigrates them and belittles them. And it's these people that are the worst of the lot, really, the comprador.
I couldn't agree with you more. I agree with you entirely.
We have more of those in the Arab world than anywhere else. Unfortunately, the Arab masses...
we are in competition. India is in competition.
Yes, I think so too, to an extent. No, but the Arab masses are suppressed physically and morally and ideologically and all forms, but principally physically. The rate of brutality, of regimes' brutality against the population, enjoined with a rate of propaganda that diverts the attention from the real issues is immense.
Would you include religion as one of the means of propaganda?
Well, religion is like, Marx says religion is there. And religion is not, when he says it's the opium of the people, he did not say it in the context that religion is bad or good. He says that, it's a place, it's a spiritual place where people voice speak their sorrows and put so the religion is there, and there's one form of religion or another. Sometimes there are atheists who are not as dogmatic as religious people and so on. That's not the issue. The issue is how the symbols of the past, for instance, in the case of Hezbollah in Lebanon, the symbols of resistance against injustice in Islam were invoked to carry out the fight against the Israeli invasion. So it is to invoke symbols of the masses reinterpret religion in ways that are determined by the power balance between capital and labor, by the ideological power balance. People, in the end, every social class has a cultural color, has a cultural guise. And religion is part of the cultural guise. It's not all the culture, but it's part of the cultural guise. And people will resort to it. So you have syncretic elements, here and there, so you have a religion which kowtows capital that started, the sort of attacks against ordinary people everywhere, terrorizing people. And you have religion that's actually rejuvenated on a class basis to talk about the justice of good against evil, and evil is represented in greedy people. So the war, the class war, is very symbolic, and it is the local conditions that promote one form of anti-imperialist religion or pro-imperialist religion, and the role of the state in that is very important, and how it directs and how it uses religion to make people, to mobilize people against their own interests.
Yes. Professor Kadri, one last question, if I may, and we'll keep this very short. So, how do you see the expansion of the war by Israel to Iran, and how do you see the Middle East now? How do you see the Middle East, say, in a month's time? How do you see the equations within the Middle East in a month's time? Because that is going to impact a lot of people in a lot of different countries in a lot of different ways.
Exactly. So as I said, the class fabric is one of the same, and the class fabric is a power fabric as well. And if Iran loses to the United States and Israel, the power fabric and the class fabric of the United States and its cohort is going to be re-empowered globally to create the conditions for exploitation, which involve the killing and the wars and all what I've said before. There's no exploitation without some dose of war and some dose of it is natural to capitalists. And what the resistance of Iran against imperialism, against the imperialist aggression, the Israeli-American aggression, the Western aggression, is crucial for the rest of the world. It's crucial in a sense. If Iran withstands the assault, we know that there is a balance of power that is wholly in favor of the West militarily. But there should be a balance. There should be on the other side a power balance, which globally people from around the world which must be mobilized to oppose the aggression, because aggression against Iran and the fall of Iran opens the doorway to all of Asia. It gives the United States ultimate power. They have already gotten Syria, and Turkey was very instrumental in the downfall of Syria. So Turkey, in a sense, has provided imperialism with its biggest trophy so far, the fall of Syria, and now if Iran falls, then imperialism and Zionism. And imperialism is imperialism has always been fascism in the third world. It's colonialism and imperialism. Yes. They are based on racist ideologies. and so what we will have uh, is a situation which is unthinkable. One cannot think of what, and let me tell you, I can think of something now, for instance, that if America wins, and if the extraction of resources entails the extraction of lives, and if the shortening of lives, the rate at which lives are shortened relative to the historically determined level, implies the rate of surplus value, then what we will have is, and because these are exponential, must rise, so the levels are exponentially rising. And if the production needs cheap people and cheap materials to produce things with, and they must destroy people and nature to produce things with, then what we will have is an acceleration of the destruction of the planet. And if Russia and China or India are cornered with nuclear weapons, then that might be re-accelerated. We don't know what the outcome will be. But the madness of capital is not really mad. It's just the mind of the commodity, the self-expanding value, which has been adopted by people in the financial capitalists around the world. So they think like things, and things don't feel and don't have moral values. And as such, this is a very worrisome situation. I believe that that the struggle in Iran and the struggle of people in support of international law and justice against the attacks on sovereign states and the genocides on sovereign people in Gaza and elsewhere is an essential cornerstone for their own survival. They are not fighting in support of Gaza or Iran. They are fighting in support of themselves when they rise against imperialism and against the West. This idea that we are supporting, you are supporting yourself. Because once they finish here, and they finish in Iran, and they finish in Syria, just the death toll, in some estimates, the death toll in this region since the war on terror is sometimes is stood at 5 million people. And now, if this war continues, we're looking at the other millions who are going to die. We have a situation where the deaths from war in this region now exceed the death of the Korean War, exceed the death of the Vietnamese War. And so it's a death factory, and death sells. Death is a commodity that sells. It's a product of war, and war is an industry. And all these things must be factored into the mind of the working classes when they strategize about the future. I mean, as one guy from Gaza put it, if we don't count on the support of the masses around the world helping us to defeat Israel, what we can count on that in 50, 100 years' time, their capital will be polluting so much they'll all be dead from the death of the planet, from some disequilibrium that will, instead of temperatures rising by 1 or 2% regular arithmetically, they begin to rise geometrically, and the planet burns out. That's a state of despair into which that person has been put, so what we are witnessing now is, as I said, we can always say we are at a crucial point in the road, but never like this. Never that such that the defeat of Iran might imply the rise, the rejuvenation of a hegemon, of an American that devours the planet, devours itself, an autophagic process that eats out the planet and nature and people. This autophagic process will be accelerated, will gain momentum, and so we have never been at a point in history as such in terms of shifting global power balances and so on. And we will see that Iran will withstand the assault, and Iran will win, that the masses will rally against. Although I must say that the ideological power of capital is significant. I mean, there are people who are brainwashed by the Hollywood and by the white beauty standards and hate for their own color and things of this nature, which is absolutely horrific. And that exists in Iran as well. It exists everywhere.
Yes.
So this, not only are weapons used against us, aesthetics are used against. Everything is used as a weapon. The machine, the knowledge, the aesthetics, and every other structure around the world.
The commodification of Indian culture.
Yes. So what we have now is a situation where when the domestic front in Iran holds against the assault, the bombings cannot defeat a nation. Their troops on the ground, they will not be able to put. And the war draws out, Iran will be able to sustain the assault. And the masses around the world must stand against the aggression. And support, because it is not only the fate of Iran which is at stake, it's their own fate. Because it's the same power fabric, the same class fabric that's going to be re-empowered to do more of the violence and more of the extraction of wealth by extracting lives.
Thank you, Professor Kadri, for this wonderful interview. And we hope that we can speak to you again in future.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest incidents. Hit the bell icon to never miss an update. We will see you next time with more news that matters. Stay informed, stay safe.